But let's kind of talk about how the concept of you know how you what are your assets. Let's talk about that and show you the once you have those assets, how you can keep a legacy around them. All right, next slide, please. Again, my name is Gary Nix with Gary Nix team. Um, I put 15 years. I'm actually 20 years in the business, but been blessed to do over 600 transactions and just deal with different people. And again, uh, my main goal, everybody that I come in contact with, is how can I get them to increase their wealth through real estate. Um, Again, I've shown slides on this before. My partner today is going to come on a little bit on. It's Matt Googling with Fidelity Title. I've been doing it for a long time. So we'll get some insights from him around what title consider okay and not. All right. Yes. So what is an asset? Uh, Whether you're an individual, you're a couple, or a family, you go about living your life, uh, doing, especially living the American dream. Uh, you put in the work, and some people believe in savings. Uh, Saving their pennies. I've had people that have hundreds of thousands underneath their mattress. That's not the preferred way to grow wealth. But either you're saving money in your savings account, or you buy investments. And let me kind of talk about this for a minute. How people acquire wealth, at least in America, the top 10 ways. Obviously, the easier way is to be born into wealth, and you still know how to, you still need to know how to manage it. I don't deal with politics, but I read stories about President Trump as to how he was born into wealth. But I believe there are a few people in his family. He's not the only one born into wealth, and yet he was one of those that managed the wealth well to become more wealthy. So uh, again, it doesn't matter how you do it. Either you marry into it, you're born into it, or you inherited it. But most of us work our way into it. The general population work their way into wealth. And most people start with investing. And, yes, you can invest in stocks, bonds, and, you know, uh, every different form of crypto, whatever kind of investing you want to do. But one thing we find out that's always solid is home uh, real estate. Of course, for regular people, real estate comes with a home they own, uh, or one or two that they have. Uh, Really focus people get into commercials, hotels, uh, that kind of stuff. But you build that wealth, and it becomes more and more. Uh, and today, it doesn't matter what you built, if it's $200,000, if it's $1 million, if it's $10 million, how do you protect it? To hand on to the legacy for uh, people to take advantage of. That's what we call the three of wealth, right? Uh, what are the three of wealth? It's kind of like an apple. If you build, if you have a base, and then you have different fruits coming up from that base, uh, and that's a home. You have a stock account, you have a retirement account, you have savings account. Uh, so you community to a foundation they are part of. But whatever it is you desire, at least, put a plan towards it. Next slide, please. So in order to protect this wealth, the easy area to do it is to set up a living trust. Uh, you know, it's so much easier because, I'm dealing with a few probates now because I believe these are people that own their home and they have kids. And I'm sure they desire for their children to take over the home, but they never set up anything. Even when you set up a will is not in place of a trust because a will can be challenged. It can still require probate, but the only thing that avoid probate is a living trust. So let's talk about what that is and how can that benefits you. Number one, it allows you to avoid government from dictating how your asset will be distributed and to whom it's going to go to, right? It reduces the chance of family members fighting with each other. And oh my God, if you think that doesn't happen, it can happen. I mean, you can have a niece, a nephew, or cousin coming out and say, "Hey, I'm the," and sometimes you even have a caregiver that's part of the family, but we don't know your heart unless you set up this trust. Because I've done probate where the will shows that it was supposed to go to the caregiver, and then you have the nephew fighting with his caregiver, like, no, that's my auntie, but the nephew never came around to take care of the auntie. Uh, it was the caregiver that took care of the lady for 30 years, actually for the couple. The husband died first and then the wife died. It's really important to know that you let your wealth go where it wants to go. When we say avoid probate, what does that mean? Does anybody know what probate means?
I do. Well, it ends up going to the court and they're like a mediator to try to work things out and find out what the truth is and where things are supposed to go, because everybody, all the family gets in. It's like, no, mom said she was leaving it to me and da da da. And another one says, no, I'm the favorite. Or there's all this insanity that goes on. And so probate is sort of like a mediator who will come in and try to dissect things and figure it out. And that's, then nobody's happy in the end anyway, because they all want all of it for the most part.
That's so true. That's exactly where probate is. Next slide. So in a probate, what happened is the court decide who receive your asset. And then because when a probate is being established, there's going to be a publication of the asset, the debt, and all of the debtors are encouraged to come in and require settlement. So sometimes you can go into a probate, you have $1 million worth of assets, and by the time the publication goes out and everybody that has owed this and owed that comes in, all of a sudden that $1 million is down to 500,000. So and by the way, this is one of the really benefit of setting up a trust, because if you have a trust and they have a trustee that doesn't require any publication, the trustee that's assigned to it would delegate the asset the way it's supposed to be delegated. And creditors are gone because we all have debts. So probate fees are usually set by law and based on the gross value of your asset. Now, let me kind of take a minute to make people understand that. Now, let's say your home is worth $1 million. You have $250,000 of other wealth. Again, I find out when I do this thing, the biggest asset people always have are homes. I have a young lady that a grandmother died, uh, and the grandmother died, and the grandmother was kind of like a whole lady that doesn't really look like she has anything. And her parents never talked to the grandmother, but the grandmother, this girl always go to the grandmother. She was connected with the grandmother, so to speak. So when the grandmother died, uh, the trust was set up of just for the granddaughter, and it turned out this lady had a triplex in Hermosa Beach that was what, like, almost 2.5 million. Uh, and even though she lived, and I think even her kids don't know, they've been separated from her for whatever. So this young girl, a young lady, all of a sudden you're worth 2.5 million. This is where, that's where most people assets are. So it's really important for us to see not just buying one home, but buying multiple homes so you have access to distribute to your children. Anyway, so probate fees are set by the law based, when you hire a lawyer in normal situation, you pay a retainer's fee. 5, 10,000. If it's a really expensive lawyer, maybe $25,000 retainer fee. And you get them to do what you need them to do, and they charge you their hourly and charge against it. But that's not the case in a probate. Even if they spend 10 hours on it, the court set the value of the estate. The first 100,000 of the estate, they charge like 2%. And for the next 100,000, it's 1%. So $1 million can become a lot more. And if it's more, if it's a $2 million asset, it could be a $40,000 fee that you're paying the attorney. So that's where you can save money by setting up this trust. And it can, again, a probate can sometimes last longer. Sometimes it can be a short probate if the families are all in agreement. But if you have any dispute at all as to, oh, I'm worth this amount and I should get 50% because I did this or that, it can drag it long. I mean, I'm dealing with a probate in Santa Monica right now that's been on for several years. Okay. So how we can avoid a probate is to establish a living trust. So let's go through the living trust. We don't have that much, so we'll move pretty quickly so we don't have this headache. Next slide after the living trust. Okay. So just wanted to kind of give people education around Matt is not on, obviously, right? Okay.
He's here now,
So,
Gary.
I'm here, Gary. Yes.
Oh, thank you. So Proposition 19 took over Proposition 60, right?
Yes, it replaces.
Okay. So and basically we're just talking around so people understand the value of transfer of when death occurs, the transfer of the estate, how one can keep the value into the next property. So well, I'll let you can see the slide. Maybe you can go through. By the way, Matt is a title rep. I appreciate you coming on. I know
Sure.
you
Yeah.
came back in town yesterday.
No problem. Yes,
All
no
right.
problem. Yeah, so you want me to go through this for you,
Yeah.
Gary?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So just so the public there who's watching understands, the probate and the trust that Gary's talking about is having to do with avoiding extra costs when you decide, to sell when it is for sale, and there's a lot of fees structure there. Prop 19 is talking about the property taxes. So if, for example, an elderly couple have purchased a home 30 years ago, which is very common, and let's say they bought in Carson or Gardena and they could have paid 10, 20 grand for a property. And now that home, depending on where it is, could be worth 800, $1 million. So there's a lot of spread there in that money differential from when they bought it, and then if they were to sell it. So Prop 19 allows that elderly couple, they have to be 55 years or older, just one of the owners, not both of them, just one of them needs to be 55 years or older. The property needs to be their principal residence, that's where they live, not a rental. And they have what's called a homeowner exemption filed on the home, which is a free form that the assessor provides, and Gary could provide it to anyone that's interested if you don't have that. And if you're not sure, we could certainly check for you on your home. And if you don't have it, it's a form you send into the assessor, and it allows you to participate in Prop 19 anywhere, anytime in the future. So in my example, if an elderly couple bought their home for, let's make it a simple number, $50,000 years ago, now it's worth $1 million, and they decide to sell the home, they could transfer their property taxes, that low tax base they've been paying for so many years. If they bought the home for 50 grand, even with the 2% increase that the tax assessor can do each year, you're talking still probably a bill that's less than $2,000 for their property taxes. When the home, let's say, is worth $1 million and they sold it for $1 million, it allows them to purchase another home. It could be a home, condo, whatever, but it has to be their principal residence anywhere in the state of California, in all the different counties. So they could move, let's say they had a daughter in Sacramento and they wanted to be by their 3 or 4 grandchildren as they get older and enjoy that. So they could sell their home for $1 million, let's say through Gary. And then there's a form they would fill out. Again, we can provide that. And that form, they attach the new property they buy, let's say in Sacramento, for a nice home up there, 800,000, they got a great home, right? They get to keep the extra 200, right? They have that money to keep. And they can transfer their low property tax bill, which in my example was about $2,000. They could transfer that $2,000 tax base to their home they purchased in Sacramento. Now, mind you, if they didn't have that savings opportunity, an $800,000 purchase would have a tax bill of probably around $9,500. So that's saving them $7,500 a year for as long as they live in that home in Sacramento. So it's a property tax savings. It's able to be done 3 times. So they could sell again and move somewhere else, and sell again and move somewhere else, and continue to keep that low tax base of $2,000. The only caveat, if for some reason they sold for that $1 million, and then they wanted to buy something more expensive, they could. Prop 19 allows that to happen. But now you have what's called a mixed bill. So you would take in my example, you would take your $2,000 that they've been paying for so many years up to the $1 million sale. And then anything over that value, if they bought for, let's say, $1.2 million, they would take the extra 200 grand above the $1 million that they sold for and add that property tax bill to their low bill. So LA County has about a rate of 1.2% for taxes. So that's about $2,200 extra on the 200. So you would add the 2,200 plus their long-time payment of $2,000 a year for their taxes, and their new bill would be about $4,200 for that property that they bought for $1.2 million. So hope that's not too confusing, but basically it's a huge tax savings on the property taxes. So we're talking property taxes, not federal taxes or income taxes. It's the property taxes on the property. Okay, is that good, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. You kind of broke it down. Anybody have any questions around that? We have a lot more people on Facebook Live. I don't think they can.
Now, I'll give you another example, Gary, in this regard. So the other benefit is, and you talked about, like family wealth and transferring it to the kids. So with Prop 19, in my example of $1 million sale, instead of selling the property, one of the children to the owners, let's say both, the owners have died, one of the children can move into the property within 1 year of their date of death of the last parent, and they can move into the property, and they get to keep the low tax base in my example of $2,000 as long as one of the children move into the home and owner occupy it. That's a benefit of Prop 19. So you'd have to decide which child that is. If there was 3 kids, they'd have to work that out. And then once one of the children move in, they get to keep the low tax base on that owner occupied property. If those parents owned, let's say, 2 other buildings, two unit properties, like Gary talks about investing in more real estate, which is always a good thing. Any other property that the parents owned would get reassessed to current market value. So the one benefit is the house they lived in, and then one of the children get to move into it. But the other properties do get reassessed to current market value. So if they had a 2-unit building in Hawthorne and it was worth, when they bought it for, $60,000 years ago, and they're paying, $3,000 a year in taxes, it would get reassessed to current market value, which, could be $1 million, $1.2 million for that property. And that particular property, the kids could keep it. It would be part of their inheritance, but their property tax bill would go up to current market value. And that's what they would pay going forward, based on the parent's death date.
Okay, now let's talk, we're talking title questions. I've got a question around that. So if on the second property that the parents own, the kids were to sell it because it's an inheritance, sale,
Yes.
do they get protected with capital gains, or do they have to pay capital gains because it's non-owner occupied?
No, they get protected on a stepped up basis. So all the properties get a step up basis, meaning that to the date of death of the last parent, the property gets stepped up, meaning if my example, let's say they bought it for 60,000, parents died 3 months ago and they decide to sell that quickly. So it's valued at $1.2 million. The property gets stepped up to a $1.2 million value. And then when the kids sell that property, they probably would have very little capital gains because it's selling very quickly to the date of death of the parent. Now, if the children held the property for 3 years and it went up another 20%, right? Then they would pay capital gains on the difference between the $1.2 million stepped up basis when the last parent died and the new value based on 3 years from now, right? So they might have a capital gains bill of, $300,000 value, and then they have to pay capital gains on that gain of $300,000. Because remember, the stepped up is to the date of death of the parent, not when they sell it 3 years from now.
Okay, all right. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. So I still want to lock it down, though, that on the home that they do not occupy, that the parents do not occupy, and if that was sold by the children, there's no capital gain because it's an inherited property, correct?
Yes, if the parents, that's an income property, that does have capital gains, correct?
It does have
That
capital
property,
gain because it's an
yes.
income property. Okay.
Inherited property, the 2 units is an income property that is not their principal residence. That would have the capital gain. Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's all right. So the only thing you always protected on are owner occupied properties.
Yes. Always protected on owner occupied, always protected. And as Gary said, putting your properties in the trust, all those properties, if they weren't in a trust and it was just owned by, John and Mary Smith, husband and wife as joint tenants, 3 different properties they owned, and they both died, let's say in a car accident at the same time, all those properties have to be probated, and all those have all the expenses that Gary was talking about and potential of all those familial claims that might come out as the probate attorney starts to, advertise these things in magazines, try to connect with the people that might have an interest in it. And that's all the headache that trusts avoid.
Right. Well, hopefully everybody's getting the value. We do have I don't think we need, let's move on to the next slide because he's already explained all of this. Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah.
I have a quick question regarding the other property that's vacant, and you were talking about that they could sell. What if another child moved into that property? Would they still have the protection as of the primary, and as far as capital gains and so forth? Could they do that?
Do you want to answer that, Gary, or you want me to?
No, go ahead.
No, they do not have the protection of the Prop 19. Remember, it's only on the principal residence. Any other properties that the parents owned do not benefit from a tax savings that does get reassessed to current market value. And
Oh.
because it's an income property, the parents were renting it. It's
Oh,
not their principal residence. It would get all the capital gains. So if they bought it for 60 and now it's worth that big number, there would be a large capital gain on that property.
I got you. Okay, great.
Now they're still going to benefit from a sale that allows them to, have a lot of money, but there is a tax bill there that they'd have to pay.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about how you set up the trust and the different kind of trust one can set up. Next slide. So one of the things I usually recommend, of course, is to hire a professional lawyer to do it. The lawyers will do it right, from the get-go. The first one I did with LegalZoom, and eventually I had to hire a lawyer. And they only did a little, correction on it. But if you can't afford it, usually, it's going to be about $2,500 to $5,000 for a lawyer to set it all up, depending on how much assets you have. And if you cannot do that, go to LegalZoom. That's another option. That's going to cost you less than $1,000. And you can still set it up. It's just you got to not do everything else, the notary of documents and all that stuff. LegalZoom will help you prepare the paperwork, but they're not going to do the notary for your different, especially when it comes to the real estate asset that you have. So set it up, again, if you can get an attorney, good. If you answer the questions through LegalZoom or any other platform, you can get it done. But honestly, I've avoided a probate just with somebody putting it up together. I mean, this guy put it up together himself online, whatever. But the trust is set up was still acceptable, that we didn't have to go to court. So anything you can do to set it up and put in all your wealth in there. Don't say I'm gonna hide this one because I don't want anybody to know of this one, because you just never know when you need to take care of this stuff.
Can I mention something there, Gary?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on a trust, if you didn't have the 2,500 to 5,000, because that is about somewhere in the cost. But mind you, it's, as Gary mentioned earlier, most families, their principal residence home they live in is their largest asset. So don't skimp on protecting it so that the family wealth is taken care of and not, there's regrets later. Now, granted, you might be long gone, but the kids have to pay for all that, and it just takes from their family wealth. But a trust is really, even in LegalZoom, it's going to have the settler, the person who, like the married couple that sets it up normally, they're called the trustees. And then they're going to decide inside that document. And successor trustees, those are the people that succeed them when they pass away. That's why it's called a successor trustee. And they're going to designate 3. Like they're going to say, their first child, Tyler, then their second child, Ryan, and then their third child, Amanda, in that order. If for any reason Tyler cannot act, then he can remove his power as successor trustee, and then Ryan would step in. So they get 3 in a row, and then they designate the beneficiaries. Those are the people who get the assets. Most of the time, that's the children. But Gary mentioned a couple of other options there, where like a caretaker or someone else who is super helpful to that family, or maybe a single woman for many years. And she just thought, you know what? Maria's been wonderful to me for so many years. She's going to get my house, and it's going to say it in the document in that trust who the beneficiaries are. So those are the main parts of a trust. And I would also recommend, if you have bank accounts, to put those in the trust name too, because all those assets that are, financial monetary gains, if they're not designated in a trust name, then they end up going to probate. So some little pieces might go to probate. Maybe they have 50,000 in the bank, and had it been under the John and Mary Smith Trust, trustees of the trust, that money would also go inside the trust and be distributed among the kids with no probate. So hope that helps.
Absolutely. And that's actually a really good one because when I was setting up my trust, we put all of our combined accounts in the trust, right? But one of my individual account that I kind of want to go to somebody else, I didn't put in the trust, but it's going to end up going to probate if you don't put it in the
It's true.
trust.
I have a real life story about a person. He's a very good friend of mine. He and his wife and their two kids they live in Orange County, and they would drive all the way to Thousand Oaks to take care of a cousin who was handicapped for probably 10 years because she had no other family. So one or two of them would go every weekend to take care of her. That's a big commitment. If you know where those places are, that's a long
Yeah.
drive.
Yeah.
They're super kind people. And they had no idea that this cousin owned 5 properties.
Wow.
And when she passed away, the attorney called John, my friend, and he gave all the properties to the family. Both of the children each got a commercial building in Marina Del Rey that they still own. And the husband and wife, John and Chris, got 3 properties. And they had no idea that she actually owned all that property.
Wow.
But she gave it to
Wow.
all of them. She gave them all of it. So yes, it's the trust is a big deal. Had that not been in a trust, it would have gone to probate,
Yeah.
and they probably would not be the ones to get it
That's right. It
because
would have
they're
been
not
somebody
family.
else.
They weren't close enough.
Yeah.
But hey, who knows?
Yeah.
But anyways, that was a real story. So that was a
Yeah. That's
pretty amazing
awesome.
story. Yeah.
I mean, just like the young lady I was talking about, that the grandmother, her parents don't talk to the grandma, but she loved her grandma, so she's always going there. They, and then grandma passed away, and it's a triplex in Hermosa Beach.
Yeah. Gosh.
So it was allocated to her, and her parents were pretty mad. Like, again, if there was no trust, that would have been the parent, even though I had a neighbor that I took care of for a long time. This lady, I'm like, you have kids. I know she has a daughter that's in Mississippi or something like that comes every now and then. But I never knew she had a son that lives in Torrance.
Oh my gosh.
And he never showed up to help this old lady. And so now the old lady passed away, all of a sudden the son showed up. I'm like, really? You've been around? So yeah, a lot of things happen like that. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so the type of trust one can establish. Let's go into those. You have the living trust. Don't move too fast. Back. Okay. So living trust, revocable trust, and irrevocable living trust. All right. So you can now go to the next slide. So your living trust is basically a legal document that places your assets, investment, kind of like Matt has been indicating, your bank accounts, real estate, even vehicles, and you have some gold and jewelries and stuff like that, that spells where you like these things to go upon your death. It just writes it out. But again, it's to have everything in there. Next slide. Now, revocable one is a legal document that places the grantor's asset into a trust during its lifetime and then distribute them to its heirs or beneficiaries after its death. The grantor can change or cancel the trust while he's still alive. So that means if you decide, matter of fact, I want to put my personal story in there. I was just talking to my wife that we need to change our trust because my son is not doing what I want him to do. So I want to take him off of it. So those are the things you can change, right? When a family member is not, what you want him to do, take him off. And they have a chance to prove themselves back to get them back inside later on. And, so that's a revocable living trust. Next one. So this is a irrevocable living trust. That means when this is set up, you can't change it. It's a trust that cannot be modified, amended, or terminated without the permission of the grantor's beneficiary or beneficiaries. The grantors effectively transfer all ownership of asset into the trust and legally remove all of their ownership rights to the assets and the trust. Matt, you want to make some comments around this?
Yes, I would say it's common, like for a married couple, let's say they set up a trust. Sometimes the trust could be what's called an AB trust. So my wife and I have trust, right? So if I were to pass away suddenly, then my side, the A side, could become, and again, this is by choice. You don't have to do this, but this is the choice you can set up. This is probably more complicated than you'd want to do in LegalZoom. That's too much. I wouldn't recommend it there.
Mm-hmm.
But with a trust attorney, you could set up the trust to where if I were to pass away, or Debbie, my wife, then half of the assets would go to irrevocable. So they would be set in stone. It can't be changed. And let's say if that happened, all my assets go to Debbie first. And then once she passed away, the assets go to the kids. Like that's what ours does, right? So you can decide all that on your own, but that's kind of what ours does. So that's an AB trust, meaning half mine, half hers if I were to die, or if she were to die first, right? And that becomes the irrevocable side. And then the revocable side that I can change is the side that I'm still alive and I can still make changes to my half. But half of it is set in stone if it's irrevocable in that example.
Okay. All right. So any questions around that?
I do. What was I was gonna say? Well, it's obvious. I mean, it seems obvious to me that whether it's when it's a revocable one, that's probably going to cost you more because you're going to have the trust attorney doing more work for you if you're taking it off, putting something on. Is that correct?
Probably there's going to be a little bit of cost, yes, but I don't think it's enough to not do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying
when you're both alive, when you're both alive and let's say you set up a trust in your 40s, you start having a few assets. I mean, people should set it up earlier, but that's not normally what happens. So you acquire some other assets, maybe you save your money and buy another property and all the things that should be added to the trust. So you can go in and make those additions as you go and add something to it. It's not a mass number. The whole thing has been established.
Yeah.
So
but
those aren't big expenses. Like let's say
about like people pulling people out and maybe adding people and doing, all of it. It depends how much you're doing, I guess, then you'll pay as it goes, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I would say that what would be worthwhile if you did create a trust would be probably to go back and take a look at updating it every couple of years. Like just kind of like take a inventory of the new assets or the things maybe that you don't have anymore and you might have to change them out. So yeah, that's worth doing every so often. Yes.
Okay, so what would be the benefit of doing a revocable one as opposed to just doing straight up living trust?
Well, they're both living trusts. I would say the two main differences are going to be an irrevocable or revocable. You get one or the other option. And I would say if you're alive, I would want, personally, this is me speaking personally, I would want to have it revocable so I can make changes once.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Gary was joking about his son, right? If it was irrevocable, he wouldn't be able to go back into that. But since it's revocable, because that's how he set it up, he has the ability to make changes to whatever he created.
The times that they do irrevocable, because we also have an irrevocable living trust. That's the one with my daughter. Because that one was set
perfect
up.
Example.
Yeah. So that one was set up by court, and it can be changed, right? But ours is a revocable one because it's fluid. It can be changed anytime you so desire to. So basically,
and your irrevocable, Gary, is in the best interest of your daughter because she's not able to make those decisions.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, so you want to do that for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's okay. Next slide, please. All right. All right. Any other questions? Matt, it's been great. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Any other questions? If not, well, I guess we'll do the gift card. Well, it feels to me like, Gloria should get a gift card automatically because she's just participating a lot. Okay. Right. Well, thank you all for coming on. Appreciate it. We'll be back next time. Probably going into the year, we'll talk about, again, in order for people to create trust, they have to build wealth, and the wealth that can be is in, adding more real estate. So we're going to talk about the different ways one can add other real estate to their platform. Thank you
That's
for
great.
coming on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Gloria.
having me, Gary.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, man. Okay.